I'm Ari Gronich, and this is Create a New Tomorrow podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. I'm your host, Ari Gronich. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, comment below so that we can start conversations that create a new tomorrow today. I've got with me Matt Javit, and he is an amazing person, 5-time International Sales Award winner, host of Amazon Prime video show World Barbershop Adventures, author of Police, a Brotherhood in Uniform Around the World. He's a culture ambassador. Matt, why don't you tell a little bit more about your story and how you got to this place of being such a success with large multinational as well as starting your own companies?
Yeah, thank you. I guess in that summary, there's a lot of dreaming going on there and living out my dreams. Started off with a humble beginning. My parents got pregnant at an early age, and so my dad had to join the Navy at age 17, and which started my journey around the U.S. as a Navy brat. Went to eight schools, 3 high schools, finished up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But through that journey as a kid, I was a pretty good basketball player and a good athlete, which ended up turning into me being a Division I basketball player. I finished up my bachelor's at University of North Carolina, Greensboro as a academic All-American. And then I went on to get my master's degree down in Texas, where I coached basketball at a junior college, and then started a small company, which brought me back to Indianapolis, because Indianapolis was the favorite place for my parents. So when my dad retired from the Navy, they came back to Indy, and it just made sense for me to get back close to my family and running this company with my brother, bartending at night, hustling during the day. And that led into my wife walking in the door one day as I was bartending. I fell in love instantly. Her, not so much, but I convinced her that this was a good idea. And we got engaged 8 months later, got married 8 months after that. Just celebrated 15 years. So I keep telling her it was the right call at that time. And then her father helped me make sense that it wasn't a great idea for me to be a bartender and start my marriage with my wife, which led me into the mortgage industry. Had a great run in the mortgage industry before the recession hit, and then that changed everything. And thank God I was recruited by a technology company to come in and start sales in the technology world, which I knew nothing about. Struggled my tail off for 2 years, but outworked the competition and just really worked hard to understand it better and improve my skills. And then hit a hot streak, which led into me winning 5 international sales awards, working for this amazing global company based out of France. And the coolest thing about working for an international company is when they do their sales incentive awards for the sales folks, they take us to amazing places. And in this case, we had a chance to go to Istanbul, Turkey, Goa, India, Chiang Mai, Thailand, Cape Town, South Africa. And one year they came to Miami, Florida. And on all those trips, when they would take the top 40 sales professionals, we could also bring our wives and our spouses. So Nikki went along with me. And we just fell in love with travel. I was somebody that had a chance to see the United States because I grew up in a military home and also playing college hoops. I had a chance to go around the U.S. and play in different college campuses, but never saw international travel. And I was blown away. It just shocked me to the core, and I loved everything about it. And so we started setting huge goals to have a chance, because every time we'd fly home on those trips after 10 or 12 days on vacation, like Americans have, I would always be dreaming about the next location, looking at the magazine in the back of the pamphlets in the back of the airplane in the seats, and I would just sit there and just dream of those next locations. So we started thinking about, like, what if we could do this full time? What if this is something that we could set out and pause our careers and just go live it? And that's what we did. February of 2017, a single backpack apiece. We left for a one-way ticket to Santiago, Chile, and spent 27 months traveling to 35 countries around the world, and really just lived out that dream and just had an amazing time doing it. And it was such a blast.
Wow. That's quite an adventurous, adventurous story. A lot of people are doing that nomadic traveling these days. And it's interesting to me because I believe that the only way to get out of our own heads and our own mindsets is to go see what the heads and mindsets are of other people and to explore their culture, but not as an American, so to speak, exploring a foreign culture, but more as somebody who's an anthropologist, almost looking at that culture as something to study and admire and find interesting enough to have conversations with locals and so on.
Mm.
So that's always been an interesting thing to me. Everywhere I've ever gone, the attempt has been to not blend in, but ask a lot of questions about
Yeah.
who they are and why they are the way they are. So tell me, what was your most fascinating place on this adventure?
Well, there's a wide range because um, you look at a place like India where we spent 2.5 months. We were lucky enough to do it. I had a strong Indian friend base before we left, so I had a chance to reach out and say, "Hey guys, I'm going to be in your country for 2.5 months. Are there any places or friends or people I should see?" And they began inviting us to stay with their friends and family. We attended 3 weddings. We're actually kind of in 3 weddings, so we had a chance to really dive deep into that culture because we're living in the homes, a lot of quiet time, just talking and hanging out with people. So India, it was an amazing adventure, and anybody that's ever been to India and into India understands that it's different. It's so much different than America. So it really opens up all your senses. To be driving down the road, I was on the back of a motorcycle on one situation with my buddy, and he just says, "Hey Matt, do you want to get fish for dinner?" I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." So he just pulls off, and there's a guy clubbing fresh fish that they just caught from a lake, skinning them and cutting them up, put them in a bag for you to take home, and that was dinner for the night. So things like that, where it's sensory overload on a regular basis, and you're really just getting to have a chance to just see things differently and just understand their culture a bit differently. So things like that. We also fell in love with Vietnam. The how nice everybody is there. The fact that their infrastructure is very strong. You can have some of the luxuries of the United States, but understand that you're in a different culture, and how inviting and kind all those people are was amazing. So we really fell in love with Vietnam. So that was a star in our trip. 6 weeks in Japan really showed me what humility and kindness and thoughtfulness is like. The Japanese people are amazing people, and just how thoughtful they are in every aspect of their life and how they treat people was eye opening. And that's the coolest thing about the travel is you fall in love with these countries, but then when you come home, you also understand the United States and what makes us special. And so that's why I'm such a big advocate of travel. Is it's not the idea that you're going somewhere. It's not just the fact you're going somewhere and knowing and understanding more about the world, but you're also appreciating the aspects of your own country as well that might not be in other parts of the world. So that's why I'm just I really feel like people and I know this next generation is going to do things similar to us. I know that they're going to pause their careers and go take on these adventures, and that's why I wanted to document a lot of it and put it down, because I know that there's people behind us that understand that doing these experiences is so much more important than having a fancy car or having a better couch, or you know what I mean, or all these things that this consumerism built into us, that we just want to push that buy button so fast instead of saving a little bit to take that adventure and do something crazy, this might seem.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take the car with you, you can't take the house with you, you can't take any of those items with you, but you can take your memories with you and your experience.
Absolutely.
And we've gotten as a culture away from traveling because we've decided to create a lifestyle that is 40 to 80 hours a week of working, and both partners working typically. Um, So there's no time in that scenario for these journeys and trips. And I think the US is on average 2 weeks a year of vacation,
Yeah.
while the rest of the world is more like a month to 2 months a year of vacation time. And so,
Yep.
how is it that we get Americans to start traveling again? And I know it's weird to say it in this particular time period where everything is shut down.
Yeah.
But how do we get people exploring other people's cultures in a way that moves our culture forward as well? So, you know, um, I remember hearing a story about somebody who went to another culture. So he went to France and was expecting the French to speak English, and was really upset that they weren't speaking English to him, and that they didn't like him because he was expecting them to speak English to them. And I found it interesting to, you know, I think that that's probably happens quite a lot, that we want the others, the people and the other places that should only exist for our benefit, to to uh to conform to the way that we are, rather than looking at and appreciating and understanding that culture and finding the beauty in other people's cultures. Is that something that
Oh,
you?
we saw it, brother. Yeah, it's one of the most annoying things you can see on travel, and it's for those people that think that way. It's like, why go there if you want the same thing you're experiencing at home? Why even go introduce yourself to another culture if you're gonna require people to act like they do in Des Moines, Iowa, or wherever you're from? You want to become and understand that you go to a Greek dinner. Yeah, they're not going to clear the plates off for 3 hours, and you're going to sit there with dirty plates on your table while you have a long conversation over coffee. You know what I mean? And that's the coolest thing about it, is you get to see like, wow, they're in no rush to kick us out here. Where in America, they're trying to flip the table to have somebody else sit in. They're okay with only having a certain amount of people in this restaurant at night, and they're not trying to get people in and out because they want you to enjoy the dinner and have a long conversation. And it's like, so it's those things that you get to understand them and know them, and know like, why isn't the waiter coming back around? It's because the waiter's chilling. Just let them relax. They're not like it is in America where everything's go go go. And it's when you hear people complaining on the road when they're traveling, it does get annoying. And it's like, look, man, you're in another country. Enjoy what this country is and what's different than America about it. And if you give it time, you're going to fall in love with it. And we would see that quite often. And it was what you talked about earlier about like kind of the conforming and fitting in to the culture. Fortunately and unfortunately, I'm 6'6", so I stand out wherever we go, and I look like an American dude. So they know that I'm a foreigner right off the bat, which is great in those conversations where if they don't speak English. My first attempt always to break that barrier is to apologize for not speaking their language, because I'm in their country. So if I don't speak their language, I'm sorry, I only speak English. Look at me, I'm an ignorant fool. Can you help me work through this? And then a lot of times, even if you try one or two words in their language, they might laugh at you a little bit, but then they'll at least work with you. But if you're somebody that says, "Hey, do you speak English?" right off the bat, it's already you're creating this dynamic of because then if they don't speak English, does that make them dumb? You see what I'm saying? And when you're in their country, they might speak Vietnamese first. So why would you ask them to speak English first? So it's all how you approach it, and really just to your point, the idea of like you're in these places, take it in, appreciate the culture, understand you're somewhere different, and that's why you booked the trip in the first place.
Yeah. So, what do you think of tourist zones versus the places that the locals, go? I mean, everywhere I go, anytime I've ever been anywhere, my first thing is I do not want to be where the tourists go. I want to be where the locals go. And so I seek out specifically somebody who can take me to a local joint or a local place so that I can experience that local culture. But a lot of Americans, I call it the McDonald's tour, because we go from a McDonald's in France to a McDonald's in Europe to a McDonald's in Israel. Like how many different ways can we experience the McDonald's, right? And we do that with more than just, we'll go to the Hilton. Well, there's a lot of local kind of hotels that are completely different than, say, a Hilton. And I'm not, it could be any of the major chains, but we tend to go to the places that we know in our minds. How do you think we can, inspire people to experience more of the local kinds of experiences rather than the tourist experiences that we've kind of set up?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the fear, because that was the biggest thing people would ask us as we were making this trip. Are you safe? Is everything okay? And it's like, man, look in the mirror a little bit. How safe is your city? How safe is Chicago? You know what I mean? How safe is St. Louis? How safe is New York? So that safety barrier is always the thing that keeps them on resorts and keeps people in those four walls wherever they are in the foreign country. And for me, is like, you can get through that and not listen to what all the media is trying to tell you, because mostly what we hear from the media is when something bad happens. A tsunami hits an island, there's some sort of revolt against the government. So we're only hearing like the negative stuff around the world that happens, that mainstream media wants to put out there because it'll get the clicks and the views that all negative news gets. And so if you can like climb through all that and try to find the truth in what's going on in these places around the world, you're going to see a lot of beauty and a lot of amazing things happening outside of those resorts. And one of the coolest things that happened to me recently was one of my buddies that watched our journey from afar online. He would listen to the advice that I would give about getting out of the resorts and spending time with the locals. And he said they recently went to Jamaica, and he said, "Man, we had an awesome trip down there. We spent almost 2 weeks down there." He said, "But our favorite day by far is when we left the resort, went to a local town and hung out with the locals, ate at the local restaurants." He said, "We came back with a bunch of phone numbers, and they're still texting us, and it was by far the best day." He said, "Thank you so much for that advice, because it's going to change the way that we travel now going forward." And it's things like that that are like, yeah, if you can see a beach coastline anywhere around the world, and you wouldn't know if you were in Thailand, if you were in the Philippines, if you were in Peru. If you just saw the waves coming in at a gorgeous Hilton resort like you're describing, you wouldn't know where you were. But it's when you get out of that place and you go walk around the town and you meet the locals and you shop at their markets, you see the things that they're eating on a regular basis, how they barter. The idea that America doesn't barter for anything, and these places everywhere else barters. So just that conversation of bartering, if they say it's $1, say I'll give you 80 cents, and just go through that process. You're going to learn so much about these places and really just fall in love with them even more than just sitting in a hotel or just drinking. But here's the thing is like you're describing, in America, we have these 2 weeks off, right? So a lot of people are like, dude, I don't want to deal with that. I just want to go and sit on a beach and not have to think about anything, and then go back to the life that I have where it's chaotic. And I get that. But if you're looking to kind of expand your brain and expand your mind and see, look at the world in a different way, that's what you and I are describing here. That's the benefit you'll get out of this. But if you're somebody that's not trying to do those things, you're just trying to get 2 weeks away. First, they're probably not listening to your podcast. But those people, they're in that engine that never stops. And they wake up and they're 70 and their life's over and they're saying what ifs. These are for the people that you want to open your mind and do something different and look at the world a different way. That's what you do. You go hang out with the locals and understand their culture a little bit better.
Cool. Yeah. Part of me thinks that racism is not just ignorant of people, but it's a lack of understanding of other, any kind of other, right? Whether that's another culture, another language, another colored, color of a person. And it's based solely on fear versus knowledge. Because if you get to know somebody or know about their culture, it's really difficult, I've found, to dislike those people. Now, you've been in place where, like Turkey, where there is, in that Middle Eastern zone, a lot of conflict. And the conflict that we hear about was not my experience when I was in Israel, for instance, or I went to Jordan and Lebanon. I didn't experience the same kind of difference that we see on the news. I don't know if you went there. I know you went to Turkey, but any chance that the differences between the people are not as great as the governments and the agendas and the media want you to think?
Absolutely. I think racism is just lack of exposure. Um, and we saw and had conversations about racism all around the world. And it was when we were in Chile, they hated the Peruvians and Argentinians. Then we were in Peru, they hated the Colombians, and it's and the Chileans. And then you're in South Africa as a white guy at the grocery store. The black checkout lady is looking at us a different way until we speak, and then they understand we're American. They're like, "Whoa, you're not the same white guy that's usually here." So they're nicer. We experienced it everywhere, and it's one of those things where if you don't have exposure to a lot of the people in the frame of reference is one or two people, you're going to think about those one or two people. And that's why it was so important for me wherever we went was to be the smiling nicest guy in the room, because I never knew if I was going to be the last white American that they met, because a lot of places that we went to were off the beaten track and they weren't typical touristy spots. So if I would meet somebody thinking like I might be the only American they ever met, and I might be the last American they ever meet. And so if they meet me and they're like, that dude is nice, I know how this works. They're gonna like, all Americans are nice. Matt was awesome. You know what I mean? Like that's literally how we think. So if you don't have a lot of exposure, because I've met people, business owners that from a different generation that say all Indians are so smart, because the 7 Indians that worked for him in environmental engineering were wicked smart people. But I was in India for a long period of time. I know all Indians aren't smart. So it's like whatever, if you only expose yourself to a certain group of people, and that's your exposure, and you see all of them like that, then that's when racism kicks in. But if you get exposure and you have enough conversations to understand, like, whoa, some people are good, some people are bad, that's across the board. Like all the races and all the different people around the world, we're gonna have good people, we're gonna have bad people. And the more exposure you get to all those different parts of it, you're gonna understand that. And most of them are really, really good people. There's just a segment of the population that sucks. And you try to avoid those people, and you hang out with the positive ones that are trying to do right by you. But we saw it everywhere on the globe where it's like America is the only racist place in the world. It's like, dude, you have no idea how racist the world is. Right. The entire world, and it doesn't make it right. It's just ignorance. It's just absolute ignorance. But it's everywhere. As a human species, we're so ignorant to the exposure that we get in our little boxes that we live in, that we think that these are the things. And if the media is telling us nothing but negative stuff, and they're putting us in this volatile state all the time, of course we're gonna see people a different way. And if they're telling you constantly that you're racist, then you're like, maybe I am racist. And then you see what I'm saying? So it's a weird dynamic, and the only way you can overcome it is exposure, by going to places you're not comfortable with, getting uncomfortable, meeting people you don't normally meet, and then getting your own truth to understand that, whoa, we're all trying to make a little bit of money, have love in our life, achieve some goals, you know what I mean? And hang out with our families. It's the what we're all trying to do is not that different from each other, no matter where you go around the world.
Yeah, it's funny. I was in Greece during the 2004 Olympics and Paralympics, and we were working the athletes out, and everywhere you go, it's really controlled. After the Olympics were over, after the Paralympics, sorry, were over, I stayed about an extra week or two because I'm the kind of person when I'm working a thing, I'm like 16 hours on those athletes. There wasn't, there wasn't an enjoy. I didn't actually see a single game when I was there.
Wow.
I was literally 16 hours. And then finally, when the days that I had off, I was on an island somewhere. But uh, I went for a walk one day in Athens. So you've been to Greece, right? It's one of the
Yes.
places you've been. So Athens, Athens. I was staying in a Monia Square.
Okay.
And so I walked to Monastiraki and had some breakfast. So that's about a 3-mile walk.
Okay.
Okay. And then right up there in Monastiraki is the National Museum, which used to be, I guess, their parliament. And then they have that museum row. And so I started walking through all the museums. And in this one day, I kept walking. For some reason, I just kept walking. And I start walking up this hill. And it's maybe 5 hours have gone by, and I'm still just walking. And I see all of a sudden I see this graffiti about the workers, blood and things like that. And then I start asking some questions because I wasn't necessarily in the heart of Athens anymore. It turns out that I walked to Iliopoli, or Iliopoli, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but I walked to a whole other city. It was 20 something miles away that I walked that day.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
and all I kept hearing is the Albanians. The Albanians. They're coming in, they're taking our jobs, the Albanians.
Yep.
And it just was like, it's like everybody has their people
Yeah.
that come and take their jobs for less money than they're willing to do it for. And then they complain and complain about the
Yes.
people who took their jobs that they're not willing to do. And I just found it so fascinating. I also, because it was 2004, we were there during the elections and the campaigns. So watching the Bush Gore, shenanigans, and watching that on CNN Greece versus CNN US, right?
Yeah.
Very different news. So you just keep getting awakened to the idea that what you think is very controlled, very programmed,
Absolutely.
very different than reality. And, just like when I was in Israel and I watch the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Jordanians and the Lebanese and, all pretty much living in a city that's no bigger than Los Angeles, or a country that's no bigger than the county of Los Angeles. And for the most part, completely harmoniously.
Mm-hmm.
And you would never guess that by watching any of the news. So I just find it interesting when I've ever gone to other places and you spent so much time and went to so many places that you get kind of an idea of different cultures and based on different geographies, I would imagine, and so on. So, I'm not going to tell you to have you run down the list, but if you were to run down, you did a couple, Japan, and so on, in Vietnam. If you were to run down a list of places and the expectation that you had, and then the difference in the people based on the expectation, that would be a really interesting thing for, I think, people to grasp. This is what I thought.
Yeah.
happen when I went to Vietnam, but this is my experience with the
Yeah.
local kind, that kind of thing. So do that. And also, I just want to know, because you're 6'6", how how much do you think that there's an intimidation factor of you in some of those cultures, like in Japan and China, where you're probably towering over
Yeah.
everybody by quite a lot? You know,
Yeah.
do you feel like there's an intimidation factor?
Yeah, so I had to overcome that. But it was cool because I'm naturally outgoing and I attempt to be nice. Now, if you see my resting face, it doesn't. I probably am a little bit intimidating, so I understand that. So I would try to overcome that by smiling a lot more often, making a lot of eye contact, and letting people understand that I'm not somebody to fear, but somebody to welcome. So I would attempt to do that because you're right. When I would walk into a room, Cambodians, Vietnamese, especially Southeast Asia, and in South America, I would tower over a lot of people, and so instantly there's a little bit of anxiety, but then I would try to overcome that just to make sure that they understood that I was there for all the right reasons and to make it welcoming. So it helped me because it would help me break through walls rather quickly, and then I could get into that comfort zone where then you're getting invited to places and getting asked to go to lunch and stuff like that. So it was actually a better for us. And then when it comes to those different cultures that really stood out, Japan was number one. I had no expectations going into Japan, and just to see how amazing those people were. And what's wild about Japan, the idea that I did stick out, and I experienced parts of Southeast Asia where I would have a lot of these stares, especially like if you're taking public transportation, you could tell that there's a lot of eyes on you. In Japan, they would not. They would not look at me because of just how their society works. Is they knew if they were staring at me that would be something like they were judging me, so they wouldn't do it. So for me, it was like hard to engage with the Japanese because they're just so kind and thoughtful that they wouldn't want to me feel like I was out of place, and they wanted me to feel welcome. So the Japanese really stood out.
Do you,
Other, go ahead.
sorry, do you think that the Japanese have kind of taken on political correctness to a whole different kind of experience? Because I know that they're very, very careful to be considerate of your feelings, of your
Mhm.
experience, um, of your experience, really.
Yeah,
Very careful to make sure that you feel comfortable as an insider or an outsider, just in general in the
yeah.
relation. Do you think that that's political correctness or just being socially, having etiquette?
I think I so this is an uneducated point of view, but the purity of the people. Where if you're Japanese, you're Japanese. I mean, it's an island where the Chinese attempted to invade, but they're pretty pure on who they are, and I think that is part of their awareness of a culture that they built upon, and spiritually, the Buddhism and the other forms of religion that they have there, and lifestyles they have are very zen-like and peaceful. And that's what really stuck out with Asia and Southeast Asia is the different religions there that are very harmonious and just like calm and peaceful. To see people walk the walk rather than just talk the talk. And I know this is I hate to say that. So full military family. I love America. I'm diehard USA. I love our country. But there's certain things that you see elsewhere that you're like, man, I wish we could do that. And that's one of them. Is it's the idea that when you're in Asia and the way that they practice every day and they walk the walk of peacefulness and not judging people and being chilled out and calm. Some of the stuff that within Buddhism that really stand out. We would hope that we could do the same here instead of just talking about these subjects and being holier than thou, but not living them. And it's more just it's all conversational, but when you see people's action, you're like, whoa, you're not doing. It's kind of like the whole COVID thing with the hilarity that with the governors around the country, like they're saying one thing but they're doing another. That's kind of how we are as a culture a lot of times. And when you're in some of these other places and it's really peaceful. And that was the thing with talking to my father on the trip when we were in Tokyo. I was telling him that you don't know what it's like to be in a peaceful city, like a non-violent city, until you're there. Your body doesn't understand it. Like when we were in Singapore and in Tokyo, like Tokyo, 30 million people. Nikki and I walked home one night at like 1:30 in the morning in Tokyo, and it's one of those things like until you know, like you're like, I have no fear. I can walk to these places and not have a fear. I don't have to look over my shoulder and think that somebody's going to get me or try to snatch something from us. Your body doesn't understand what that feels like until you're there. And you're like, wow, this is so like peaceful and calm. And I was trying to tell him, like, you couldn't do that in any major city in America. You can't walk home at 1:30 in any major city in America and feel like I feel safe right now. And until you're there, it's so different. And that was just some of the stuff that stuck out to us on this journey is like people that walk the walk. It's nice. It's calming.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in Israel, and like I said, and I saw, a 9-year-old girl walking home at, I don't know, it was maybe 10 o'clock at night. And I was thinking to myself, when I was younger, we would go out and ride our bikes all day
Yes.
long. We would go to parks. I could have been 5, 6, 7, and I could have been gone all day as long as I showed up at kind of some prescribed times.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom to move freely, so to speak, in my community. And now I have a 7-year-old, and I wouldn't want him to be out riding or going to parks and places by himself. And it's such a shame that we as a society have allowed that to be the case. It's like taking it back to ourselves. We allow everything that happens to happen, because if we didn't allow it to happen, it wouldn't happen, right? So if we didn't allow our communities to be so unsafe, they wouldn't be, because we would control it. But it's funny. I have this talk that I'm going to be doing that's really about bullies. My saying is, silence is a bully's best friend. So I'm going to kind of go there on the cultures with you and see, where did you find that the bullies were more prevalent, less prevalent in around the world, and how people react to those bullies and to the systems? Because as you know, the show is a lot about creating a new tomorrow today. It's about how we can figure out that we made this shit up and we can make it up better, that everything in the world that we see is a construct of our imagination and we can imagine it different. So when you're traveling around the world, if you were to take pieces from each culture, right? Which piece would you take from which and where? And in order to make that jigsaw puzzle of the kind of world that you'd want to have, that you'd want to live in?
That's an amazing question. First, I think like we would in a different setting, maybe you and I would debate over the topic of letting your kid play at a playground, because the book Factfulness shows that it's safer now than it's ever been. And true statistics would show that this COVID crisis has changed that a little bit, because you're seeing an uptick in violent crimes, especially around our country, because I think they're just unrest. People want to get out of their homes, and when that builds, then they do get out. Crazy stuff happens. So you're starting to see a little bit of that. But prior to that, we were getting safer and safer around the country. And the idea, I've got 2 8-year-old, 7-year-old nephews, and I kind of preach this to their parents on the reg, is the idea that there's so many cell phones, there's so many video cameras out there, so everything you do is on camera now. So I think these kids are much safer, and there's a fear component out there, but it's just the mainstream media. Go ahead.
I have one thought, and
Yeah.
want you to address this one thought about that. Do you think that it's safer because more kids are inside on their computers, laptops,
That's a great point.
right, etc.? Not that it's safer, just that it's per capita maybe safer because there's less kids actually in the parks and in those places.
Yeah.
I walk around and I don't see kids on the block playing baseball in the street, right?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Well, we're in this crazy environment where if your 6-year-old kid's walking by him or herself to the grocery store like they do all around the world, a parent might say, where's your parent? Who you here with? And if they're like, no, I'm just going to the grocery store, some crazy helicopter parent might say, well, no, that is illegal. We've got to call the authorities. So I think there's like this fear component in parents to say, we can't let our kids do the things that we did. Because I'm with you, man. I was just having this conversation with my mom where me and my brother would just disappear on our bikes for the entire day. The idea that I had a paper route very young, 9, 10 years old, like these things that like we had like jobs. And have you seen the movie Donut King?
Yep.
It's an awesome movie. Yeah. About the Cambodians that came over and started the chain of donut chains on the West Coast. And you look at those kids, they were in the donut shop working at age 5, 6, 7 years old. And it's this mentality, and we saw it all around the world where we'd see there was a 7-year-old kid in Guayaquil, Ecuador, selling roses out of his backpack. There was kids in India selling goods at age 6 and 7 with no parents around them on the streets. It was everywhere. And then you come to America, and kids can't go to their mailbox down the street without some sort of guidance. It's insanity, and I think we're doing our kids an injustice by taking away these freedoms early in life and just building in that resourcefulness, teaching them in a certain way and teaching them how to get out of scenarios, because they're out there. There's evil people out there that want to harm children. But I think that there's ways that we can do it, especially as a community. If you're talking to people, say, hey, I'm letting my kid do this. Be aware if you see him or her, if anybody's around them, be aware. But I'm sorry for getting on that tangent. I just, and honestly, as somebody without kids, I understand when I look at things as an uncle, and as if I was to look at it as a father, it'd probably be so much different than if I had my own children. So that's why I know the line that I can't cross. But when we saw the things we did with children around the world, it's a stark contrast of how we handle kids in America and the freedoms that and really the hustle. Because that's what stuck out in that movie, The Donut King, is the hustle that you build in those young kids, the desire to work really hard to achieve something. And you saw that with all the different donut shop owners in that movie, that as they got older in life, they achieve amazing things. And I think that we build that into our kids, that hustle mentality, that it helps them.
Do you think that the Midwest is still doing that with, so to speak, the farmers and their kids still doing the work on the farm versus, nowadays we have the big agro, which requires hazmat suits versus, straw mouth and overalls. But, are there places here in America where that is still happening? And it's interesting. I would want to see a study and say, okay, in places where that's happening in the US, here's the success rate and here's the happiness, factor, and here's.
But all this has happened so fast, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's because all this is the technology in the last 20 years is what's really. It's not only I think it's both the mainstream media and the social media's focus of these topics that are fear mongering people to change how they handle their children. It's also the idea that kids love to play games, and they would. It's much. It seems to be easier to parent when you give your kid a device or a game to have them go play a game for 3 hours, then go take them to the park for 3 hours. So it seems like it's both a great babysitter and extremely entertaining. and there's value in gaming. I think that we discount the value in gaming quite often, especially with what's happening in the future. Is that a lot of people tend to just look at gaming as dumb time wasted. Where I'm one of those that if they're playing the right games, there's a lot of problem solving involved as well. So it can be beneficial. But all this has happened so fast. So the study, we probably won't know like how that looks in 10 years removed. But the Midwest values are still strong. I mean, that's why they call them Midwest values, because it's a hardworking. It's definitely different. I had the chance to go out and work on the West Coast. It's totally different. I mean, our coasts are in different regions of the country are way different from each other, and those Midwest values still hold true. And you do see kids here that play and they go to the park and hang out together, and it is different than in kind of like an urban setting where there's a lot of we go to Chicago and visit family in downtown Chicago, and you rarely see kids by themselves. It's always like a kid with a parent nearby,
Right.
instead of kids just hustling on their own.
Right.
But to your former point, like the idea of culture taking a little piece of everything. If you can take the beauty of New Zealand, just the basic beauty of the country, New Zealand, the kindness of the Japanese, probably the bartering skills and just the gritty hustle of India. I'm trying to think, the absolute fun of the Portuguese. We had so much fun in Lisbon, Portugal, and just how they celebrate and they just take on life and they just love life so much. Take that from the Portuguese. The emotions of the Italians. We spent time in Sicily and just run around in northern Italy for 2.5 weeks in a car. Those people are just amazing and they're gorgeous. The Sicilians, I used to have a list of in my head of the most beautiful people around the world. Sicilians are just gorgeous humans. They're just beautiful people.
Really, that's interesting because
Yeah.
the Sopranos would have you feel differently.
Who's that? Who's that?
The Sopranos would have you feel differently.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But yeah, when we're on the island, you'd be in a cafe and a woman would walk in and you're just like, oh my God, that is just they're just gorgeous people. And then yeah, there's so much about the Chileans are beyond fun, just so much fun in Chile, and how much fun we had there. But yeah, just take little pieces of all that and create an island and disappear forever for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you recommend if somebody is thinking, hey, I'm my business is online, I get to travel a little bit, I could be nomadic with my business. What would you suggest for places to go and ways for them to engage with the culture there?
Yeah, so if we're talking post COVID and it's the world's a little bit more normal,
That were normal.
yeah, yeah. I would, if you've never traveled, and this is like your first opportunity to get out of the U.S., I would suggest somewhere like a Portugal or a Spain, where it's absolutely different, especially like a place like Lisbon. It's gorgeous. It's hilly. It looks like San Francisco, but uh, small cobblestone streets. It's everything you would dream of a like a romantic European city. And then you'll be there and you'll know that you're in a different land, but it's not a stretch. It's not crazy different, as if you were going to take the leap and go to Thailand, where it's the form of transportation is different. It's the language barriers might be more extreme. You have less luxuries than you do at home. Although the entire world is catching up really fast. Now that we're going to 2021, the infrastructure around the world is so much better. The access to Wi-Fi is great. They understand the luxuries of nice cafes. The entire world is catching up really fast. So a competitive angle, America needs to watch its back a little bit, because there's a lot of opportunity out there to go to these other places and live a very similar life than you do in the States at a much cheaper cost. And that's what's appealing about a lot of these places. If you can have a digital nomad lifestyle where you're making the US dollar, but you're spending it in places where you can live like a king, in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, some of these amazing places. Albania, you mentioned Albania. Albania is awesome. Spend time in Albania and the dollar goes real far there. So if you can make that money and go there, your eyes will be open, like how well you can live there. But you don't want to, if you're not one of those people that want to jump all in and make that trip to Southeast Asia where it's super cheap, or Latin America, then a place like Portugal, southern Spain, Greece, Croatia. Croatia is a little bit more expensive, but it's gorgeous and nice. Yeah, that would be my initial step. And then once you get comfortable there, you meet a lot of other travelers. They're talking about Colombia, or they're talking about Bali. Bali is a huge digital nomad hub. You start to hear about these places, and you're ready to take that leap into something a little bit different, not crazy extreme, but it's just different than what we're used to in America. Then you go there, then it's done. You'll never come back, because those places, if you can make good money in those places, it's amazing. It's so much fun, and you'll meet other travelers, and that's the coolest part about it. You meet other travelers, but you get into the culture. You start to understand the culture, but you're meeting people that have done more than you and have traveled more than you have, and they can tell you about the awesome places around the world. Then your list just gets longer and longer of the places you want to go to, and then at that point you're wrapped into the world, and it's awesome.
How would you recommend people approach the local communities when they go there, behavior wise and so on?
So I'm someone that if you know you're staying somewhere for 2 weeks or more, it's great to see a lot of places, but I think you'll get more of it if you find a place you like, whether it's a cafe, a lunch spot, or a dinner spot, and you visit once and you're like, I like this place. So my wife Nikki, she's a vegan, so we'd have to kind of be strategic on some of the places we'd go to. I would eat anything, but for her, we'd find like some great spots. And once you find that place that clicks for whatever category you're trying to fill, go multiple times, because the first time they're going to see you as like a customer or a traveler. The second time they're going to recognize you're there, and they're like, okay, he must be staying for a little bit. And after like the third time, they're going to think that like you're more of like a local. So then you can start to ask other questions of, hey, where else should I go? What other places in town should I visit? And they're going to treat you differently than just your first time in trying to get advice. They know that you spent money there 3 or 4 times. They're getting comfortable with you, because a lot of these places around the world, in these smaller cafe restaurants, it's the same owner there every day. It's not like they have a staff like in America. It's the same guy. It might be his house upstairs, and the shop's down in his basement or whatever, in his front of his house, and he's just working out of there. So they'll get comfortable with you after 3 visits, and then you can start to ask those questions. And then you never know where it could take you. They might say, well, we're having this get together on Saturday. We would love for you guys to come over and hang out. And then once you start getting in with the locals and doing what they do with their music, or their food or their drinks, or however they partake in what they're doing, then it gets really fun. So that's what I would definitely hit that spot. Find that local spot that you get a rhythm with, and always be nice and cordial, and tip like an American. And they'll like that, because a lot of these places, they don't tip. So when you tip like an American, then they like you a little bit more as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had that experience in Greece with a restaurant, and I would go there every kind of night after my shift, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to eat. And eventually, we would sit and talk for hours, as we do in Greece. And it turned out he had lived in Boston for a little bit and had a restaurant in there in Boston, moved back to Greece. But he would make these special dishes that were really for him. And because I was there talking to him all the time, I literally had a constant supply of food that was
Awesome.
his experimental recipes, this lemon sauced lamb. I mean, just amazing.
Yeah.
He would be like, he'd come out with a plate and say, okay, we're testing this food. Let's try this out. And we would just sit and talk for hours.
That's the best.
About the culture. It was pretty cool. So
yeah, that's the best.
That is definitely a thing to do. What's your biggest message? The thing that you want people to know the most about culture and diversity and this, as you say, cultural immersion travel. What do you want Americans to know the most? And then what would you suggest to people who might be coming from outside of the US into the US
Hmm.
that would help Americans feel more comfortable about the people that are coming to visit us? Because we obviously have an issue with immigration, even though it's been the cornerstone of our country. But I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's some things that people feel foreigners or foreign travelers are doing wrong, or would like to see different when they come to visit us. So let's take it on both levels, because let's get our foreign relations back in the right direction by
Yeah.
just understanding each other's culture. So
Yeah.
let's take that both sides.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes to just checking your ego at the door and taking a step back away from political correctness. And when you're stepping into these cultures, don't see it through the lens of how media portrays people, and just take it on in the most authentic way that you can, and judge for yourself what you experience, and not with the short lens that you might have going into it, and form those new relationships as you can in those foreign lands. And as you're going with a very positive, a very fresh ideal of these people are, I'm going to say that they're really good people until they show me different. And then you're going to have a better experience. It's just like anything in life. If you approach it the right way, positive will come out of it. And then when you're in that, don't try to push your Americanisms on them. Just attempt to be in the moment and understand why they live the way they live. Because what you got to understand in America is, no matter, it's it, we are money first. We are a money first country. All the headlines, all the information, it's all about economic value to the individual, the corporations, the government. That's what we focus on. These other countries around the world are not like that. A lot of places are family first. They're community first. They might be religion first. So they don't see it the same way we do. When we see a restaurant, such an easy example, you see a restaurant, you're like, man, they can make so much more money here if they did it this way. Instead, it's like, no, they have the most fun here because they do it this way. And that's why it's the restaurants are in a family's name for generations, because at the end of the day, they make enough to have a stable income for the family, to have this great thing for their community. So just check your ego at the door, and when you're going to these places, do the best you can to not bring all the baggage with you, because that's where you're going to get the most out of it. And you're going to see it a different way. And then those visitors traveling to America, I would say the same thing. Don't believe everything you see on your news, in your foreign lands, because when we talk to other people and you ask them, what do you think about America? A lot of I had, at one conversation I had, do you guys have school shootings all the time? Like, that's what they see. That's what they think about. And we have school shootings all the time. And it's like, so what they're getting fed from their news, because let's be real, governments around the world, some of which hate the freedoms we have in America. So the best way that you could target those freedoms is to show, this is what freedom gets you. This is how, if you have all these freedoms, here's the baggage that comes with freedoms. School shootings. This is, you want guns, this is what happens. You're gonna have killings everywhere. We talk to people about, oh my gosh, because a lot of times we wouldn't say we're from Indianapolis, we'd say Chicago, because it's easier for them to understand. They're like, oh, Chicago is so violent there. Al Capone, things like that. So if you're coming to America, check that at the door as well, and understand that we are a kind people, and we might not be as inviting as some of the places that you're from, but if you ask the right people, you make eye contact, and you talk to the right people, Americans are nice people, and we're going to be kind, and we're inviting. And the other part too is, and I do this with, I've had friends that like correct me in public settings, because the idea that I have traveled and I've had a chance to meet a lot of amazing people around the world. I'm pretty good at understanding where you might be from based on what you look like. And so I'm not afraid to approach somebody and say, excuse me, I'm curious what your heritage is, or what part of the world you're from. And it's turned into some great conversations, because if I see somebody that if they look Vietnamese to me, and I say, what part of the world are you from? And they say Vietnam. I say, amazing. I spent 3 months there. What part of the world and what part of the country are you from? And they say, well, actually, I came over here when I was 6, but my parents are from Hanoi. Then I can take them down that conversation and have an awesome conversation, get to know each other a little bit, tell my experience, their country, and how much fun I had. And I've had people, my friends, say like, whoa, dude, that sounds like you're being racist. I'm like, no, it's not racist. Everybody likes to talk about where they're from. Like, if you live in the States, you're from Kansas City, you can tell me how good the barbecue is in Kansas City. So these folks come from a different land, and they're proud of that. Don't be afraid. If you approach it the right way, don't be afraid to have a conversation with somebody about where they're from, because you might actually learn something. And if you're in a work setting and somebody's from India or Poland or from a different part, and you get to know a little bit about their homeland, you might want to take that trip to Warsaw, Poland, because you hear how awesome it is. And so that's what. My point is, like, if you come here, don't be afraid to tell us where you're from, because you might meet somebody that's actually traveled there, and then they're really inviting. And then use the, because Nikki and I use the technology around the world. We used Workaway, where we volunteered our services for a free bed to stay in. We used Trusted House Sitters, where we watched pets in people's home for a free place to stay. We things like Meetup, where you can get on Meetup and find groups that have your similar likes and interests, and you can join a Meetup and then meet other people that do the same thing you do. And those are easy ways to as you're traveling, meet other people, and then they might invite you in. So I would definitely use the technology out there, because it might help you get in to like subcultures within the US, and then you can get invited, and you're going to have a more authentic trip as well, just like we had when we use those technologies in other places.
Awesome. What do you think what do you think the benefit to incentivizing for both companies, government, whoever it is that's doing the incentivizing, but to incentivize travel to other countries versus right now what we have is kind of like disincentivizing all kinds of things. And I'm not talking about during pandemic. I'm talking about generalized, because the pandemic to me is something it will end. Quarantines will end, lockdowns will end at some point, and we'll be able to, move freely about the earth. So
yeah, you're saying the idea of, like, take Bali, Indonesia. Our government would send us there, or their government is inviting us,
or government and companies. I'm not prescribing a way of incentivizing it specifically, that it becomes an incentivized thing versus stay here, only know what's in your box and what's in your office building. Is we Americans like to do our 40 to 80 hours a week in one building for 40 to 60 years and get a gold watch. So we have we have a history of limiting our perspectives to a very small thing. The other thing, I notice about pretty much, criminals and violence is that it's block oriented, right? If you're on this block, you're in this particular gang. If you're on that block, you're in a different gang, and you can't go to our block, and so we won't go to your block because right. So we limit our perspective, I feel, by ghettos and communities and blocks. I mean, I remember in Los Angeles, I would talk to somebody in South Central who had never been to the beach. And the beach is 5 miles away from South Central. So it was like, you've never gone outside of this this really small place. There's been no incentivizing you to leave your little block. And so perspective is only the block. So I'm asking, like, what would be the benefit for a company, say, to send their employees overseas to
Oh,
go to these other countries, whether it's government, whether it's companies, doesn't matter. I'm just saying the benefit to people to be incentivized so that they feel like traveling to overseas is a doable thing. A lot of people don't even think it's doable.
yeah. I think when you're looking at the dynamics of America, where money is trumps all, is the idea that it can bring economic value to your company. So because if you understand the hustle and the hard work that goes in to some of these other countries, and you get a chance to live and walk through their marketplaces and see how they sell and how they interact with their community, you will inspire your employees. So for me, just that the idea that we're cush here. It's easy. America's easy living. We have no idea what um, the hardships that go on around the world, and that's the most eye-opening thing. I work with an underprivileged community on Indianapolis's west side. It's not underprivileged when you compare it to some of the dire settings around the globe. But in America, it sucks. It's rough. But so when you go to these other places and you get to live and you get to see how most of the world interacts, and you're going to come back with the freshness and appreciation of what your company has given you the opportunity to achieve, and what the living in America gives you as well. And I think just that motivation and inspiration of traveling some of these places around the world will give you, and it gives you a different set of eyes on how you're looking at your product or service or whatever it is you're offering within your business. You'll look at how other cultures might look at what you're delivering, or how just individuals are selling or positioning what they're selling. So that's for me. That's the best thing about travel, is the idea that you get to see, especially if you've got a product, you get a global product, if it's on e-commerce or something like that, and you could find potential customers out there and how they view what you're positioning. You can see their perspective on what you're positioning, if they would ever buy it or not. And because we like you're saying, we look at things in the box that we know. So as you expand that and see how other people might target it differently, it's gonna it's going to be give you more opportunity potentially in the market. But I think, just from the motivation, I wish that we'll likely never have a scenario where other countries have around the world, where 18-year-olds have to do military for a year. But I wish in America we would say, okay, when you're 18, you have to go travel to some of these third world countries to get into their culture for just a month. And because if you go to some of these places around the world that are much different than we are, you're going to have an appreciation for the globe. You're going to appreciate these other cultures, but then you're going to come back to America and understand what you have is pretty damn good, and you're going to complain a whole lot less.
So we give them a trip to end the complaining. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Because that's what the made up things that we complain about in this country are just endless. And other countries have to look at us like, oh my God, these guys have it all, and all they do is whine. And that's the hard part. When you hear all the whining that goes on, it's like, man, if you had any idea how other parts of the world lives, you would be so appreciative. And that's what I think it could really open. It'll never happen, but that's why I'm really big on that gap year thing. The Europeans do it, the Australians do it. We met a lot of travelers out there that were either 18 or 22 years old, because they were either going right after high school or they're going right after college. And it's a great time to see the world, because your mind's still fresh, it's not jaded, and you still have big dreams and hopes. And if you experience other parts of the world, you're going to come back and be like, yeah, this is it's fresh and new, and it's a different way to think about your home country. So that's why I wish Americans did more of that. I wish we did this. I wish we adopted the whole gap year idea.
Right. So here's a my last, like, major question. we look at communities and we'll see a documentary or so, and the happiness versus happiness in countries versus the money in countries, right? So I think it was the Himalayas that got ranked as the happiest community, the happiest people on earth. And those Himalayans don't really have a lot of money. When you traveled to, say, India or any really of these cultures, were the happy people those that had or those that did not? And what could you define as the thing that, like, the deciding factor? Because we all get taught that the more money, the more stuff we have, the happier we'll be.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've seen that in the world. So I haven't traveled as much as you. So, why don't you share, like, where did you see the happiness factor play in?
It's for me, the happiest people we met were the most present in the moment that they were, and most of the time they had the least. And it was that a tuk-tuk driver in India that's making $1 a day, but extremely present and there. And when you're talking to him, he's talking to you and not thinking ahead. And that's a lot of the problem in America is we're always dreaming into the future, and we're not here present in the day that we're living in. And it was quite a battle when we traveled, because we were going to all these amazing, tremendous places. And so there was always a new location on the horizon. But the time that we were in that country, we knew that it was limited. So we wanted to be as present as we could be. And that's what we attempted to do, is we try to stay in the moment as much as we can. And we that really made us a lot happier. But there is no you cannot, I mean, it's a cliche for a reason. You can't, money can't buy happiness. And we saw it everywhere. People with the most humble settings would invite us in for a drink, and they would want us to come to their house so bad to see their house. And so we take them up on it. We go to their house, and it was like a small apartment with a bedroom, and the kid would sleep on the couch. And it was, and they would go to the top shelf to get the whiskey that they only brought out when they were celebrating, and they would pour me a shot of whiskey because they knew I like to drink whiskey. And it was those situations where people had nothing, but they were so happy in the moment, always present, and so giving that you're like, you really check like, okay, what is important? And for those people, it's community, it's family, it's kindness to strangers and things like that. And but we saw good things from rich people as well, but you would see the most like pure joy from those with little, that were just ultra present in what they were given, and just thankful. Just the gratitude and thankfulness on a daily basis is what really, some of those communities, you can just feel it. You just feel it as you're walking the streets, and just the smiles, the endless smiles. Yeah, but so it's easy to say, but in the world that we live in, where consumerism is just so in our face every day, it's difficult to back away. And that was part of our journey, or part of our trip. And the reason that I wanted to do it for 2 years, more than 2 years, is to really get away from the things that we came so accustomed to, and how easy it is to push that Amazon buy button. And it resets you. We reset, but then once you get back into America, man, it's so easy. It's just so easy to buy what you want every day, and just get caught up in the cycle of have it now, have it here. Why wait 2 weeks if I can have it tomorrow? You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's tough. It's not easy to get out of what we're how we're wired in this country, and the fact that it's pushed upon us, and it's easy, so easy.
So Here's the thing. Do you think that it's possible to experience the American way of life and be happy, like in community and in touch with our people again? Because I think that, the 50s was kind of like the last vestige of block party and community and people
Yeah.
living that way. And even then it was only really a certain demographic of people that did that. But do you think that the two match at all? Do you think that the American way of life, so to speak, with the amazing drive to go further and do more and create more and so on, do you think that lends itself to having a society that can be considered happy, content?
Yeah, that's tough because the American dream is real, and we would hear the words American dream around the world. It's not something. It's just not the phrase that we use. It's used around the world, and it's real. You can go from a zero to billion here. There's many stories from rags to riches in our country, and the idea that it's built into our DNA to have these stories and to connect that to success and money is where you're trying to aspire to is deep into who we are. So I don't know. I think it's I'm a dreamer. I'm a driven person, and a lot of that is connected to financial gains. But I think it's how you view money. If you view it as a trophy or you view it as freedom. I view money as freedom, and that the idea that if as I'm making it, I'm creating more freedoms that I can do my own thing. And it's how you look at money, whether you're filling your house up with a bunch of things or you're using it to create new experiences in your life. I think that's the difference. But I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure. I'm optimistic. I know that America is a great place, but the hardest part is the controllers of the information is scarier now than it's ever been. I'm not that old of a person. I'm 44, but I know it's changed so much in these last 20 years that the controllers of the information that we receive is that's the scariest part, is that they can dictate how they think they want us to live. And it's showing that they can actually move masses of people to think a certain way. And that's the scariest thing is hopefully this next generation understands that you can cut away and not rely on this information and get away from some of these platforms. But it's going to be really hard to detach. And so I think it's two things. It's this idea that we want to live out our dreams and have big goals, but it's hard to think that true happiness might be getting off all these social platforms and disconnecting and becoming more closer to nature. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's all. It's so much easier said than done because it's so easy to just jump on Twitter real quick and look at what's going on in the world, and it just changes your whole way of thinking for the next half hour, and your mind's going crazy because it's such a happier life to think like, okay, it's not all this information is not really messing with me anyway. Because you think about all the stuff that people get angry about, and it really doesn't really affect them day to day, and they get so mad about it. And it's like, is this really going to affect you tomorrow? No. So if you cut it out and you just stay zoned in on what your world is and present in your world and to the people around you, you're going to be a much more happier person. But it's so easy to just click that button and see what's going on in the world and get irate about it.
Yeah, it's interesting, as we've moved away from physical contact with each other
Yeah.
and that kind of thing, we've moved more towards this, as we call it, global citizenship, which is otherwise known as Facebook. And so we think that we're connected because we're seeing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
We're not in the present. We're in, we don't know if that post was photoshopped, and if it was 3 years ago. And it was like, I saw this video at the beginning of the pandemic stuff of this string of tanks in Long Beach going down the road, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that.
Tank after tank after tank.
Yeah.
And you think, that is this happening right now? No, that was 3 years ago. And it was basically when the military base was like having a parade of new equipment
Yep.
to the military base. But it's played as if it's happening now. And so the present becomes mixed with the past, which becomes convoluted in the future, and nobody knows what's real
Yeah.
for what's in here and what is in here, like your eyeballs in the natural world, meaning not on a screen. And
Yep.
so
Yeah, I have a hope that we'd have to go through a much darker time, but with these deep fakes, the idea you can manipulate video is that we get to a point where you can't believe anything. Like you literally, I'm almost there personally, where if I read anything, I'll triple check if it's moving enough for me to say like, whoa, what is this? I'm trying to dig deep into the details to find the real truth. If we get to a point where you literally can't believe anything, video, audio, and headlines, that people say it's all fake, and then they really release themselves from all the platforms. If we get to that tipping point, I thought we'd get there pre-political. I thought there would be deep fakes with Trump and Biden saying things, and I thought that it would be used in a bigger way than it was. But I think there's going to be a situation where we get to that point where you literally can't believe anything you see online, that you're like, all of this is fake. Even the stuff that I want to believe, it's all fake. And then you're going to see people really step back and say, I'm not using anything anymore. And we get back to a situation where we're in more of local communities, and maybe things like these neighborhood apps and stuff like that, which those even get volatile. I'm not sure if you're on any of those, where the local neighborhood apps, they get political, and it gets wacky real quick. And then now you're looking at your neighbor like, and you can't say anything you want to say because now they know where you live. So yeah, but here it is, man. It's all this technology is so new. We're just learning. We're just trying to figure it out on the fly how we're supposed to use this stuff. And we got people with a lot of money that have their own agendas pushing down among the people on how they want us to use this stuff. So it's scary times for real.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's end on an amazing note. What are 3 tips, tricks, suggestions that you might have for our audience if they're planning on going on a trip somewhere or doing some digital nomadship? Give some actionable things that they can do to create their new world today.
Yeah. So what I would do is, if this is a dream of yours in the next 6, 9, 12 months, 3 years, start early with the profiles that are important. I was just saying bad things about the social, but there's some platforms out there that are really positive. Like I said, we used Workaway, we use trusted house sitters. Workaway essentially is you giving your skills up. There's a long list of different skills that you could give to that community, and then people around the world will invite you into their homes to do that job for 4 to 8 hours a day, and they'll give you a place to stay. And you're instantly involved with other volunteers and an amazing host into the community that you get to see real local experiences. But you don't want to wait last minute to do things like Workaway, meetups, trusted house sitters, all these amazing websites that help travel be cheaper, because everybody thinks travel is real expensive. You can do travel in a cheap way, and that's one of those ways. So if you set up those profiles now, and you do things local, so if you're somebody who lives in Des Moines, Iowa, and you get on Workaway, you can actually do Workaways in Iowa. So maybe on a weekend, you go and you help Sally on her farm do the goats, hang out with the goats. You stand at Sally's place, and then when you leave, Sally gives you 5 stars. If you're building those 5-star reviews early in the process, then you want to go down to Machu Picchu in Peru for 2 weeks, keep your costs down. You can maybe do some volunteer work in Cusco, Peru for 6 days. You meet locals, you're hanging out, you're helping with the bed and breakfast, you're staying for cheap, and then you get to go see Machu Picchu because you have these great ratings. But you got to build these profiles up over time, and then that helps you become more trustworthy to those communities. So that would be my thing, to really help keep the cost down from a budget standpoint, is think strategically beyond that. And then I know that's a long one and it's a lot of different things in there, so it's kind of 3 in 1. And then I would just, from a financial standpoint, you want to line things up. There's certain bank cards that work better for ATMs around the world. There's certain credit cards that give points to keep your travel mileage down. We use that a bunch on the road. And it's, from a budgetary standpoint, that's what you want to do. And then I think it's great to dream. I think it's awesome to look at these locations around the world that you want to go to, and do a lot of research and dream about these places, and really look at the places you want to go to, and think forward, because it helps. It boosts your positivity as you go into the grind of saving all that money that you need to travel. That dreaming process really helps out.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
The easiest way is probably passportjoy.com. That's Nikki and I's blog. It's got the podcast on there. It's got our Amazon Prime series that you mentioned. I got a book that I've sold. So all that stuff is on passportjoy.com.
Cool. And last but not least, we're just gonna, send them off with the most amazing short story that you have from your travels. So just like, what was the best experience you possibly had?
I think this will summarize a lot of things we talked about today about how amazing humans can be. And it was one of the highlights of my journey. So my big brother is extremely important in my life. And he's somebody that's kind of what we described prior, where hadn't really traveled that much and really lived in kind of a, not necessarily closed-minded, but couldn't understand what was out there. He would even ask me from time to time, like, Matt, I don't understand why you're doing these things. I don't understand why you're going to these places. And I would try to explain to him how amazing it was. So towards the end of our journey, him and his wife joined Nikki and I in Da Nang, Vietnam. And they had 9 days there, and we had the time of our lives, hanging out with them, going to the markets, showing them the fresh fruit at the restaurants, hanging out at the beach, doing all the things you can do in Da Nang. It's an amazing city, one of our favorite places in the world. And during that adventure, my brother and I would go on these long scooter trips, because the scooter lifestyle in Vietnam is tremendous. So we take out these scooters, and my brother's a big, beefy guy. Like I said, I'm 6'6", about 240 pounds. My brother's like 6 foot, real stocky and big, one of the strongest dudes you'll ever meet. And we both got a bunch of tattoos on us, and we're on these scooters going out to see these beautiful mountains, through these more rural settings where they're not used to seeing Americans. And it was during the Chinese New Year, which is a huge celebration in Vietnam. And so we're going out there. It's about an hour and 20 minutes out. And while we were going out, a bunch of people were waving at us. And at first I didn't understand what was going on, but then later it clicked that during the Chinese New Year, it's luck for them to invite people into their homes. So we went and saw this amazing lake in mountain that we were going to. And I told my brother, I said, hey, if we get invited to go to somebody's house, we're stopping. We got to stop, dude. And he's like, all right, we'll do it. So we're coming back, and sure enough, this kid was waving at us and like signaling us to come in. So we stopped at scooters, and we pulled over, and we go into their home. And it was amazing. One kid spoke English. He translated for the family. There was his father was there as well. He had been in the military, and so he was translating for the entire family. But they brought out all this food. They brought out the Heineken beer, and they were just taking us in. And it was like you've got two beefhead looking Americans. We're kind of intimidating if you didn't know us. And they're just inviting us into their home and bringing out the best stuff for us to have a broken conversation and to understand each other just a little bit better and to start their new year the right way. And we left there like, man, it's just a tremendous feeling to know how amazing people can be and how inviting they can be. And we just both left there with an amazing experience and also just this warm feeling of how awesome humans are.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. If you could leave everybody with one thought, one final thought, that is what you'd like, all of these experiences that you've culminated together, one thought that you'd like the audience members to get, what would that one thought be?
I would say that it's okay to want to live out your dreams, and it's okay to dream big and then want to work through it and make it happen. Before we took this big adventure, there was no way I could live this out. I've made every excuse in my mind why it just wasn't for me. And then finally it clicked to say like, hey, I can do this too. And I'm sure there's a listener out there that's saying they've been dreaming about this for a while and thinking it's not possible for them. But I promise you, you can do it. We did it. And now I've got other dreams that I'm working on, and it's possible for you to do it as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I know that the audience members have gotten a lot from this. And this is your host, Ari Gronich, with another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, comment below so that we can start conversations that change the world, create a new tomorrow today, and activate our vision for a better world. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And we're out. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I appreciate all you do to create a new tomorrow for yourself and those around you. If you'd like to take this information further and are interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are all passionate about activating their vision for a better world, go to the website createanewtomorrow.com and find out how you can be part of making a bigger difference. I have a gift for you just for checking it out and look forward to seeing you take the leap and joining our private paid mastermind community. Until then, see you on the next episode.